For today's site visit, we are going to travel in the footsteps of perhaps the most epic, badass archaeologist gunslinger of all time. To go deep in the jungle to a place that was a war zone not too long ago, and which the Guinness Book of World Records names as the largest religious complex ever built. That's right, we are going to Angkor in present-day Siem Reap, Cambodia. And notice I didn't say Angkor Wat, as the word Wat means temple in Thai and Khmer, and Angkor means city. So when you say Angkor Wat, you're merely referring to the largest and most famous temple there, but the whole area is known as Angkor. And it spreads out over 400 square kilometers or 150 square miles. Now for reference, that's about 5 times the size of the island of Manhattan, or about a quarter of the size of Greater London. And it's chock full of temples, monuments, and other archaeological remains that are not quite as photographic, like drainage systems and artificial ponds. For example, the area around Angkor Wat alone, which is just 500 acres or less than a square mile, contains at least 72 temples. Given the sheer scale of this site, we could be here all day. So let me just stick to what you need to know.
By 90%. As Albert Einstein.
These are ruins of the Khmer Empire. So, like all the stuff that Douglas Latchford, who we met in the episode of Archaeology Crime, liked to nick. The Khmer Empire lasted more than 5 centuries from its founding, usually dated to 802, until its fall in 1431. It controlled most of mainland Southeast Asia at its peak, but its borders shifted as it warred with rivals like Champa in present-day south-central Vietnam and Ayutthaya, the Thais. Now, like the kingdom of Mataram and Java, which we discussed in the context of Borobudur, the Khmer kingdom was Hindu, but then adopted Buddhism. The two religions sort of coexisted, something you'll see in the Theravada Buddhism of Southeast Asia today. This is why, for example, you may find the Hindu deity Ganesh in a Thai Buddhist temple. Now, there are actually a fair number of surviving inscriptions, so we do know something about the foundation of the empire. It was founded by King Jayavarman II, who threw off the oppressive yoke of the rule of Java and united the dispersed Khmer people into a single political entity. Now, no one is totally sure what Java refers to, whether that's the actual island in Indonesia, or perhaps the Chams, who were in Vietnam and would be long-term rivals of the Khmer. No images of Jayavarman survive, but there are accounts of his deeds in various inscriptions. Anyway, he founded a new capital at Hariharalaya, just about 15 kilometers or 9 miles away from Angkor. So this became the new focal point for the unified kingdom. And here the kingdom grew more prosperous and stable, developing and deepening its own unique culture and style of architecture. For example, this early temple, Bakong, was built in the late 800s. The Khmer began to be more of a regional player and successfully navigated relations with powers like the Chola, Tambralinga, Srirajaya, and Dai Viet kingdoms. Now fast forward to the 1100s and it's a period of weakness and political instability, including successful invasions by Champa. Suryavarman II ascended the throne in 1113 and shook things up by allying with the Chams and jointly invading Dai Viet and cozying up with the India-based Cholas, who had a lasting cultural impact on the Khmer. To celebrate his reign, Suryavarman built Angkor Wat, which to be sure was not the first temple in the area. There were lots of those. It was just by far the largest and most magnificent. This was a guy who liked to build.
But I'm a builder. That's what I love to do. That's probably what I do best.
Dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, the temple is enormous, at over 400 acres and being named by the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest religious structure in the world. Set in a moat which probably enclosed lots of other structures, the temple is known for both its symmetry but also its detail, being covered in bas-reliefs and statuary, though generally the style is a bit more rigid than in some other Khmer imagery, like what we saw in some of Latchford's looted works. It's most famous for those lotus towers, which symbolize the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, the center of the universe in the Hindu cosmology. The temple's main tower lines up precisely with the morning sun of the vernal equinox, and some of the other towers with the solstices, so it clearly was designed with great intention and skill. So it's believed that the order and symmetry of the temple are meant to symbolize that all the world was okay with Suryavarman's rule. But there's a few odd things that stand out. First, the temple is oriented to the west. These normally are oriented to the east. And its bas-reliefs run counterclockwise. If you remember from Borobudur, when you circle these temples, you're supposed to go clockwise looking at the murals. So these facts combined lead some scholars to think that this is actually the funerary complex for Suryavarman. And later, archaeologist Charles Higham did describe a jar taken from the central tower that may have been a funerary urn. And indeed, this place took his entire reign 37 years to complete. Now, based on various research, it's estimated that as many as 25,000 people, attendants, priests, etc., staffed the complex, with 125,000 additional people in supporting roles like getting food and maintaining the roads around it. Anyway, not long after Suryavarman II came King Jayavarman VII. He would become Khmer's greatest king, and he ascended the throne in 1181. And pretty soon, his face was everywhere. And Jayavarman VII took power by rallying the people to expel the Chams who had successfully conquered Angkor. And warfare, this would become a theme. In fact, fun fact, the current name Siem Reap actually means Siam, the old name of Thailand, and Reap defeated, so Thailand defeated. Now, he would go on to construct Angkor Thom, which, if you ask me, is actually the most impressive temple in the area. Those faces all over the main temple, the Bayon, are meant to be the Hindu god Brahma, but they sure do look a lot like Jayavarman. Building continued and the site grew, but the Khmer Empire actually began a long and steady decline in the 1300s. Now, the reasons for this decline are not totally clear, but one of them was certainly instability, backbiting, and betrayals among the royals. And this is something we see repeatedly in history, in the Byzantine Empire, even through to today.
Not the woman you married! I refuse to be blamed any longer for this grotesque misalliance!
Other hypotheses include climate, like floods and droughts, disease, and a growing population that put pressure on the empire's complex system of water management. However, one thing that was certain, Ayutthaya, the precursor to present-day Thailand, rose and invaded a number of times, until in 1431, the Khmer just decided to move the capital eastward to a less vulnerable position where it remains today at Phnom Penh. At this point, Angkor began a terminal decline. Now, Angkor Wat itself, the temple, was never totally abandoned, but many of the other temples were, slowly reclaimed by the forest. In the late 1500s, Portuguese traders and missionaries came upon Angkor Wat, and in 1589, a Franciscan friar named Antonio de Madalena described it thusly.
Half a league from this city is a temple called Angat. It is of such extraordinary construction that it is not possible to describe it with a pen, particularly since it looks like no other building in the world. It has towers and decoration and all the refinements which the human genius can conceive of. There are many smaller towers of similar style in the same stone which are gilded. The temple is surrounded by a moat and accesses by a single bridge protected by 2 stone tigers, so grand and fearsome as to strike terror into the visitor.
However, these early encounters by Europeans with Angkor Wat seem to have been totally forgotten until Henri Mouhot, a French naturalist, which is totally different than naturists, came upon the site during his travels of Southeast Asia in 1860. Mouhot wrote about his travels in Southeast Asia and described the ruins as even surpassing those of ancient Greece and Rome. The French coveted this area, which was then under Siamese or Thai control. So even when they took over Cambodia in 1863, They always had their eye on those temples. However, it wasn't until 1907 when the French bullied a much weakened Siam to cede the area, and they immediately began work on removing the overgrown forests and had archaeologists documenting, studying, and restoring the sites starting in 1908. And those archaeologists pretty much stayed there continuously for the next 70 years, even after Cambodia gained independence in 1953. The restoration and archaeological work was finally called off in 1975 during the Cambodian Civil War. At that point, the Khmer Rouge and murderous dictator Pol Pot took control of the country and killed nearly half the people in it. The temples themselves were actually the site of fighting during the Civil War, as the Khmer Rouge made its base nearby. Check out those bullet holes. Finally, as the situation began to settle a little bit, the Archaeological Survey of India stepped in to continue the restoration work, as the French did not recognize the government of Cambodia at that time. And as usual, these efforts and the earlier ones of the French used a lot of old methods which are certainly no longer acceptable, so some of them probably did as much harm as good. Finally, the place was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1992, and since then a myriad of associations, international organizations, and sovereign countries have stepped in to support the park. Since 2012, a comprehensive aerial survey was conducted by a lot of international researchers using LiDAR, which, as you know, can see beneath the trees. The study revealed that rather than being lots of independent sites with small towns and communities around them, the area of Angkor was actually one large metropolitan area, similar to the findings of that study of the lost Amazon city in Ecuador that we've talked about a few times. And the Angkor region was estimated to have up to 900,000 people living in its heyday. And with the images they took, the team was able to reconstruct what at least the area right around Angkor Wat looked like. And it was full of little ponds, probably for agriculture, and small dwellings and temples and other structures. And in areas of interest, there were archaeological projects using geophysics and targeted excavations, not only of the fancy temples, but also the residential areas, to try to understand how normal people lived and supported themselves. Restoration and maintenance works on the sites are never ending, supported generously by international donors, but I can't imagine that it's ever enough. So that's the historical and archaeological background. Let's talk about your visit there. Firstly, this place is ginormous, so you are going to want to spend some time there. I'd recommend 3 days. Sounds like a lot, I know, but this will actually give you the ability to break up your visits to those temples, which are amazing but can quickly become monotonous and overwhelming. Better to intersperse it with time at the pool or other cultural activities. Trying to cram it all into 1 or 2 days really is going to detract from your experience. Unlike in the past, Siem Reap is actually a pretty swanky place now with a broad range of hotels, so you should definitely have your pick of luxury if you don't feel like roughing it. And there are other worthwhile things to do. The Landmine Museum was a poignant reminder of the country's extremely traumatic recent history and the role of the outside world and all that. Look there, made in the good old USA. And that reminds me of another positive change. Nowadays, it's pretty much safe to wander around at will. Back when I was there, you'd still see signs for areas that were roped off due to landmines, so that should make you feel a little better. Plus, Cambodia, like Thailand and Myanmar, is a very gentle and welcoming culture, but the people in Cambodia tend to be a bit shy and reserved. Some of my most memorable experiences, aside of course from the incredible temples, were visiting a local school and talking with the kids. Check out the kind of graffiti they made at that school. It's a far cry from the pics and other obscenities we scrawled on our desks and in the bathroom stalls. And look at the way they ate that ice cream in baguettes, a remnant of French colonialism. Or this visit to Tonle Sap, a major lake in the country, which is basically their Bondi Beach. Now, getting back to the actual temple sites, which is of course the reason we're here, broken record alert, For a city-sized monument area, you are definitely going to want to hire a guide. There are just too many temples, and the guide will take you to the must-see and hopefully some of the lesser-known sites. For example, everyone knows Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom, and Ta Prohm. That's the Tomb Raider temple. And that's me in my Lara Croft moment. And the guide will hopefully not only be able to tell you a more detailed history and set of factoids than I've been able to share here, but also show you some of the hidden secrets of the place. For example, there are tons of murals of apsaras, sort of angel-like creatures, but a lot of them are unique. For example, I think there's only one in the whole temple whose teeth you can see. Or check out this dinosaur motif, which suggests the ancient Khmers must have found a stegosaurus somewhere nearby. You'd never have found that on your own. And the sites are much more crowded now than when I went. I think the annual visits back then were like 100,000, and they peaked at 2.6 million right before the pandemic, which makes now actually not a bad time to go, as the numbers have recovered, but only to about 900,000, less than half of the pre-pandemic peak. But crowds are a fact of life for now, and hence my advice is not to bother too much about the famous sunrise shot. It's often misty, and it's kind of like a music level size crowd, so unless you're there during the solstice, which I was, I'd give that sunrise a skip. And some of the guide's tips about where to go should be super helpful, because for the sake of the preservation of the monument, you can't just walk wherever nowadays. We definitely were not as conscious of this back in the day. So like there's me, for example, stepping all over the monument. However, there's still plenty of opportunity to behave badly, so as to preserve Angkor for future generations, you will want to know how to visit here responsibly. All right, I know that's a long one, but I tried to be parsimonious with this amazing site. Hopefully you have a better appreciation now for the history, especially the archaeology, and some practical tips to help you conquer this iconic site. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.